So we are very excited to be here, as Panzer said. I have actually witnessed the battlefield pitches, and you guys are really, really in for a treat, but not just that. We obviously have some of the most brilliant minds across the globe here in Sydney to chat about leadership, diversity, and a host of other topics. And I think it's time we just get started. So with that, I'd like to welcome our first guest. Please welcome to the stage Zillow CEO and co-founder Spencer Rascoff, who is going to sit down with me. Come on down, Spencer.
Thank you, Jordan.
Thank you.
Good morning.
So I know I was talking to a couple people this week, and I was like, yeah, I'm going to sit down with Spencer from Zillow here in Australia. And they're like, what is he doing here? And I was like, I don't know. So what are you doing here?
That's a fair question. First, I'm very excited to be here, so thank you for having me. Zillow Group is a public company. We've been public for about 7 years, and we have a lot of very large shareholders here in Australia. About 40% of the company is actually owned by Australian investors. And so I come here at least once a year to meet with our shareholders and update them on the progress of the business, and that's what I've been doing here for the last couple of days.
So you're not launching an Australian Zillow?
We are not launching an Australian Zillow, at least not right now. We're focused on the United States. We have a lot of work to do in the U.S., and the size of the opportunity in the U.S. is huge, and so that's where our focus is.
Absolutely. But I mean, it would be silly to ignore the global opportunity. I was talking to an investor recently who said, I'm not interested in any company that doesn't have global ambitions. So, I mean, let's just pretend you were expanding internationally. What would the first market be?
Let's see. If we were expanding internationally, I guess certainly Canada seems closest. So by geography, at least, Canada would be a good candidate. For us in the online real estate space, the U.S. market is so huge that there's a lot of work to do there, and there are international online real estate companies. Australia has several, and so there's a lot of competition already internationally. So that's why thus far, 10 years on, we've just focused on the U.S. for now.
Okay. Well, you call me when you're ready.
You'll know. TechCrunch will be the first to know.
Yeah, I'm holding you to that.
Okay.
Seriously, if I see it break somewhere else, we have a problem. You are a co-founder in Zillow. You became CEO in the last 10 years, right?
Yeah, when we started the company, I ran marketing, and then I was the COO, and I became CEO about 10 years ago.
Right, and then led the company to an IPO in the last 7 years, and now have 3,000 employees. So my main question has to do with company culture, because obviously Silicon Valley is dealing with that. Let's just put it that way. How do you define a company culture early on? When you have 10 employees, obviously bonds are made, there's a level of intimacy. How do you define that to where it can grow to 3,000 employees, let's say?
So this is an incredibly important topic. I'm proud to say that I cared about culture before it was cool, before there were these scandals that have caused every company to re-examine its culture. It was something that we focused on really early on. When companies first start, the culture comes from the founders initially. And so, if you have a culture of transparency at the founder level, a culture of egalitarianness, a culture of just treating people the way you would want to be treated, then that is where the culture comes from. If you have a culture of tolerating jerks if they're high performers, a culture of, stepping on people's toes, et cetera, that becomes the culture of the company. It becomes increasingly hard the larger you get to change the culture. What we did at Zillow was we waited to codify the culture, to actually document it, create core values and programs like that until we had about 100 employees. Now, it doesn't mean we weren't paying attention to culture. We definitely were, but the sort of writing it down and creating the stress cubes with the thing on each of the 6 sides or whatever, all that kind of corporate stuff about culture and programmatizing it. We did that a little bit later once the culture was created. And I think that, for me, I've always recommended that as a best practice to startups. I think if you try to codify it too early, it's forced, and employees sort of view it as unauthentic. And so we waited a little bit before productizing it.
Well, and one thing I hear a lot from founders is that you start, and for a year, 2 years, even 3 years, you are creating the vision for a product, and you're very hands-on with that product, and then suddenly your job becomes to hire.
Yes.
And those are very different skill sets. So as it relates to culture, what are your best practices when it comes to hiring?
I mean, the interesting thing about a high-growth company is the job changes so many times over the years. I mean, my job today looks totally different than it looked 3 years ago or 6 years ago or 9 years ago. And so for every position, whether it's the CEO or any position, you have to think to yourself, is this the right person in that role for the next 2 years, for the challenges that face that role for the next 2 years, not the last 2 years. So when I guess the first best practice of hiring is really figure out what are you hiring for, and realize, by the way, that every employee that shows up for work today, you're rehiring. Like just the fact that they show up to work today is just because they had the job yesterday, but you as their manager really need to think, do I think they're the right person for the role going forward? So best practices for hiring, clearly understanding the role, evaluating for what we call core value fit, not culture fit. I think evaluating for culture fit can frequently be code for hire people that look like me and talk like me and are the same gender and ethnicity.
That I want to get a drink with.
Yeah, exactly. So we talk a lot about this, that a lot of companies use the airport test, which I think is terribly flawed. And the airport test is, would I want to be stuck at the airport if my flight was delayed with this person? I think that's a terrible litmus test for hiring somebody. There are a lot of people that I want to hang out with at the airport who I don't want to work with, and a lot of people I want to work with who I don't want to hang out with at the airport. So we apply a core value test, not a culture test, which is, do they match our 6 core values? Own it, team sport, winning is fun, move fast, think big, turn on the lights. I mean, these are our core values at the company. And we try to evaluate the candidates based on the core values, not culture fit. Culture fit is great for a fraternity, a golf club, your social friends. That's fine, but that's not a company.
You have a podcast where you talk to leaders about leadership, which makes sense. You've spoken to Sheryl Sandberg, Bill Gurley, Petraeus, and many, many more. What is the best piece of advice that you heard from one of them?
Well, the common thread that comes out of all of these interviews I do on my podcast is about leading a mission-driven organization. And this is, I mean, it's been amazing to me to see that regardless of company size, large or small, industry, tech, non-tech, ownership structure, public, private, nonprofit, government entity, the common thread is people want to work at a company where they feel part of something bigger than themselves. And it makes sense, and part of it is generational, millennials and just younger people want to contribute in a bigger way, but part of it is just primal, that you want to be part of something that can have a bigger impact. So that's the most common thread, is the importance of weaving a mission-oriented narrative in your organization. So, like, quick story on this, for example, and hopefully this will resonate with some startups in the room. It's pretty easy to have a mission-driven culture if you're a consumer-facing company, right? Our mission is to empower consumers with access to information so they can make decisions about the most important real estate trends. Okay, fine, I get that. But what if you're an enterprise software? That's a little harder, right?
Our mission is to make a lot of money.
Well, so that doesn't get people running out of, jumping out of bed and running to the office in the morning. At least not the way it used to in the 80s. And so I was talking with a founder, for example, in LA the other day, and this founder makes enterprise software for companies that to help with their recruiting and hiring, in particular for like fast food chains. So if you're McDonald's or Panera Bread or whatever, and you interview tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of candidates, it's software that helps them with candidate tracking. And I'm like, wow, that's boring. Like, what could possibly get me to run to the office in the morning with that? And to hear this founder describe it, he's like, no, you don't get it, Spencer. The mission of this company is to change the lives of the candidates. Because imagine that you make, $12 an hour flipping burgers at McDonald's, and you're just trying to raise your family. When you apply for that job, right now it's a terrible candidate experience, because you apply from some website and you have no visibility into what happened to your application. And then you have to apply over and over and over again to 20 different restaurants or whatever. So we have the opportunity to change lives and give that person more time to spend with their family and blah, 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 blah. And like, he just got so spun up going on and on about the mission of this company, and it was authentic. I mean, he believed it, and I could tell that his employees probably believed it too, just because of his passion. So you can create a mission-driven organization, even in something as, in my view, as mundane as enterprise software in the food service industry, and that's really important to create culture.
Let's talk about competition a little bit. You and Realtor.com.
Sorry, we have no competition. Just kidding. But yeah. Everyone always has competition.
Sure, yeah, exactly. Realtor.com seems to be the biggest threat right now. And I know you guys settled a lawsuit with them last year for $130 million. when you're thinking about this competition between them and you specifically, or them and Zillow specifically, what is the single most important determining factor in who will win out?
The quality of the employees and the culture of the company, because in technology, that is the most important asset. So that's why we focus so much on trying to make sure it's a great place to work, and we have innovative people. Innovative people create innovative products. So if you wouldn't let me stick with people as the answer, I would move on to product. And product for us is the quality of the website and mobile apps, the ability to generate organic audience, the ability to build cool stuff. That's what attracts audience and consumer. We're a media company, just like TechCrunch. And as a media company, we need a huge audience in the real estate category. And advertisers follow audience. So for us to beat the competition, we need great people to build great products.
And where does data rank on that list?
Data is a critical ingredient to create that product. If you think of, think of us as chefs. So chefs have raw ingredients, and then they go and prepare incredible meals. Data is probably the most important ingredient that we have. And for us, data means everything from listings of homes for sale to Zestimates. That's our computer model's opinion of what every home is worth. That's our ingredient that we create from other raw ingredients. To traffic information, to property data. I mean, you name it. There's a data stew that we mix and we serve to our diners in our restaurants. And our restaurants are our 6 consumer brands, from Zillow, which is the largest, to realestate.com, which is the newest and the smallest.
Yeah, when you say Zestimates and ingredients and stew in the same sentence, I get hungry, so you need to chill. I know that you do have data for more than 110 million homes in the US, which is staggering. At what point does that Foursquare play come in? At what point does the data actually become the second side of the business?
Well, we haven't to date tried to monetize our data. I mean, we get asked all the time by hedge funds, for example, that buy mortgage-backed securities, or investor groups that buy lots of properties. Can we use your data to help us make financial decisions? And to date, our philosophy and really our mission is to set all this information free so that consumers can make smarter decisions, and then we monetize through advertising. And that's pretty deeply embedded in our cultural DNA. So even though we probably could make a bunch of money by monetizing data directly, we'd rather it be free and help people make decisions. That having been said, a lot of people use our data for lots of things. So just for example, about 60 real estate brokerages now put our real estate agent reviews on their websites. They use our APIs to publish reviews of their own real estate agents on their sites. Many, many thousands of websites put our Zestimates on their websites. So we have a lot of APIs that allow our data to be made available to other developers.
And what about protecting that data? Because when you say you want to set it free, it stresses me out a little bit.
So protecting the data is very important from competitors who might try to scrape our site and steal our data and then repurpose it. And that certainly happens from time to time, and we do our best to put a stop to that. Investors also steal our data to try to get a read on our performance and our business results. This is a fascinating field that is evolving very quickly, where hedge funds and other investors can learn all sorts of insights from information on your websites and get a pretty good read about your business results by really stealing data about what's happening on your website. So those are certainly risks,
Well, not to mention the personal information, right? Like, I mean, we've seen what happened with Equifax.
For sure.
And as a brand, that's kind of over. So
I mean, in our case, there's really no. I mean, we have it all out there for free for anyone to see already. So there's really nothing that a bad guy could hack and then set free. We don't store credit cards. We're not an e-commerce site. So we don't. To date, we haven't wrestled with issues like that. I think the one piece of data that we don't publish on the website is owner names. So we know the name of the owner of all 110 million houses in America. We don't put that on Zillow. on the homepage.
And that seems like the piece that's stressful in my mind.
And
right?
we debate this internally a lot, which is should we include owner names or not? And seems like a great idea because it's available in the county record. If you went to the county courthouse or scoured the county website, you could probably find the owner name. But what happens if something bad happens to one of those people, and it's because the bad guy found where the person lived because of our website? So it's a fine line. A lot of other websites put owner names on sites, and to date, we haven't done so.
How long will it take for me to be able to click once on the Zillow app to buy a home?
I don't think you'll ever be able to do that. I don't think you actually want to do that.
Dream big, Spencer.
But here's why I don't think you want to do that. I think you want the advice of an agent to help you figure out what to pay. Now, you may want, and I think we'll get to the point where you and your agent can be conversing. Should we pay this? Should I pay that? Okay, yeah. Okay, now press the button. So maybe yes, that dream will come to fruition. But I think there'll be an agent whispering in your ear.
Well, and my mom's a realtor, so I don't
Mine
really
too.
want you to displace her. Yours too?
She's retired now, but she was a realtor. Yeah.
They should be friends. No, like I think that there is a value to having a realtor to kind of guide you and help make sure that you're safe and making the right decisions. But there are other pieces that can be vertically integrated, like
Yes.
inspections and lending, and
we're working on all of it. So, for example, the most frustrating, or to me, one of the most frustrating parts of a real estate transaction and the most anachronistic is signing all the paper documents. It's crazy that in 2017, most homes are still bought by the buyer, sitting there for 45 minutes and signing hundreds and hundreds of pages. We have a division, a company that we acquired called .loop, a startup that does electronic signature and electronic transaction management for real estate. And our vision is to integrate that into all forms of the Zillow product so that it can actually be an electronic signature. It can be an electronic transaction. So, and we're working on that. So there's no question that parts of the transaction will become digitized and become more seamless and have less friction. But I still think there'll be an agent in your ear.
Okay, my last question, because we are short on time. I found this interesting. In the US, there are more Google searches for Zillow than there are for the term real estate, which is like a Kleenex type situation, right? Your Kleenex
Yes, we're a
instead of a
verb.
tissue.
Zillow is a verb in the US,
Right.
which is cool.
So for entrepreneurs, how many entrepreneurs are in this room right now? Raise your hand. Yeah. So what advice do you give to them in terms of building a brand that becomes a verb, especially with a silly word like Zillow?
So I think empty vessel brand names are advantageous over generic brand names. So Zillow is better than realestate.com or realtor.com or apartments.com because it can mean anything. It can flex to mean anything, right? And initially Zillow meant figure out what your house is worth, and then it became where to buy a house, and then it becomes where to get a rental. Over time, it's going to become where to get a mortgage. And so empty vessel brand names allow that flexibility. I think the best ones are the ones that have some connection or connotation to something in the real world. Like Netflix, I think, is kind of the perfect brand name because it's an empty vessel, but it sort of tells you movies, it sort of tells you internet and streaming, but in a subconscious way. Zillow, it tries to do that. Zillow is a portmanteau, which means a merge of two words, zillions of pillows. And it's supposed to be the data, the quantitative side of real estate, the bedrooms, bathrooms, tax assessment, data, mortgage payments, all the math on real estate, and pillows, which is the squishy, touchy-feely, where you rest your head at night side of real estate. And that's what real estate is. It's the merge of those two things. Most people don't know that. Most people think Zillow is just a silly word, and it is. But it's trying to have that real-world connotation of zillions of pillows.
I feel better about the word Zillow now.
Thank
you for explaining that. All right, give it up for Spencer. Thank you so much.
Thank
Spencer.
you.